In June 1981, as tensions in the Middle East simmered under decades of wars and rivalries, one of the most daring airstrikes in history unfolded in total secrecy. The world had no idea that Israel was preparing to cross three nations' airspace to destroy a nuclear threat before it could even come alive. The story begins in the late 1970s, when Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, began constructing a nuclear reactor near Baghdad with the help of France and Italy. Officially, it was called the Osirak reactor, a peaceful, nuclear project meant for energy and research. But in Tel Aviv, Israel's intelligence agency Mossad believed otherwise, that Saddam's real plan was to build an atomic bomb that could one day wipe Israel off the map. Israel had learned the hardest way that survival in the Middle East required vigilance. Only a few decades earlier, the Holocaust had left the Jewish people with a scar that would never fade. Prime Minister Menachem Begin, himself a man who had lived through those dark times, made one thing clear: he would never allow another enemy of Israel to possess the means to annihilate his nation. And so began the planning of Operation Opera, a strike so secret, so precise, that even the United States wasn't informed until it was over. In early 1981, the Israeli Air Force quietly selected its best pilots, men who had trained for years, flying low across the deserts to mimic the long flight from Israel to Iraq. Among them were young aviators who had fought in the Yom Kippur War, men who understood what was at stake. The challenge was immense. The target was nearly 1,000 kilometers away, requiring the jets to fly across Jordan and Saudi Arabia without being detected. The plan demanded absolute perfection. On June 7, 1981, as the sun began to dip over the Negev Desert, 8 F-16s and 6 F-15 escorts roared into the sky. Each F-16 carried two 2,000-pound bombs. The radio silence was total. The pilots had been ordered not to engage, not to respond, not even to speak unless absolutely necessary. As they sped eastward at treetop height, the first major danger loomed: crossing Jordanian airspace. The Israeli pilots flew so low that radar couldn't detect them, but a Jordanian air traffic controller spotted them visually and sent a message to Amman, reporting unidentified jets heading east. But by the time anyone tried to confirm, the formation was already gone, slicing through Saudi skies. For nearly 2 hours, the aircraft maintained radio silence, hugging the earth and fuel tanks dangerously low, until at last, in the distance, Baghdad came into view. The target, the Osirak reactor, stood gleaming in the late afternoon sun, surrounded by anti-aircraft guns but unaware of what was coming. At 6:35 p.m., the Israeli squadron leader gave the command, "Attack." One by one, the F-16s pulled up, climbed sharply, and released their bombs. In just 80 seconds, the first wave hit the target directly, turning the reactor dome into a blazing inferno. The second wave followed within moments, finishing what the first had started. The explosions ripped through the reactor's core, and within 2 minutes, the Osirak nuclear program ceased to exist. The Israeli jets then turned back west, leaving behind nothing but fire and disbelief. Not a single plane was lost. The mission had been executed with flawless precision, a strike that lasted less than 2 minutes but would echo for decades. When news of the attack reached the world, reactions were explosive. Many countries condemned Israel, calling it an act of aggression and a violation of international law. Even the United States, Israel's closest ally, initially distanced itself. But behind closed doors, many military strategists quietly admitted that Israel had just changed the course of history. Years later, documents revealed that Iraq's reactor had indeed been capable of producing weapons-grade plutonium. Had Israel waited even 6 more months, Saddam Hussein might have had his first nuclear weapon. Prime Minister Begin defended the operation publicly, stating, "We shall not allow any enemy to develop weapons of mass destruction against the people of Israel." His doctrine, known later as the Begin Doctrine, would become a foundation for Israel's national security policy for decades. For the Israeli pilots, the mission was both thrilling and haunting. They knew that a single mistake could have meant capture or death deep in enemy territory, yet they flew with complete focus, driven by a single thought: the survival of their nation. As the years passed, historians would look back on Operation Opera as a defining example of preemptive defense, one that shaped global military strategy. In the 1991 Gulf War, when Saddam launched Scud missiles toward Israel, many remembered that if not for the 1981 strike, those missiles might have been nuclear-tipped. Operation Opera wasn't just a military mission, it was a message that Israel would act first rather than wait for destruction. Today, more than 4 decades later, that night in June 1981 remains a symbol of daring precision, national resolve, and the extreme measures nations will take when their survival hangs in the balance. Operation Opera proved that sometimes, history is written not by the loudest voices in diplomacy, but by the silent thunder of jets cutting through the evening sky. Subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories of real military operations and secret missions that changed the world.